Hello and welcome to Movie Town, the revival cinema scene show. We are jumping into May's revival recs around LA and beyond. And so let's jump right in. Gonna start in Santa Ana this month at the FRIDA Cinema. I just released on the official halfway to Halloween day of the year, May 1st, the Movie Town's first feature-length documentary, Camp Frida 9, the movie. And I shot this last year at Camp Frida's legendary all-night, or the Frida Cinema's legendary all-night movie marathon, horror marathon in around Halloween called Camp Frida. This was the 9th year, and I spent the entire night over there with them and shot. And it's a doc that really takes you into the experience of what it's like to actually go to an all-night horror marathon, and met a lot of really fun people out there, and it's available for free on YouTube now, so check it out on the Movie Town channel. So without further ado, jumping into the Frida Recs. I start this month there with Polyester. They're continuing their John Waters kind of retrospective tribute for his 80th birthday last month, and there's been kind of a resurgence of his movies playing around the scene. But Polyester from 1981 is showing in glorious Odorama. And this was, at the time, John Waters came up with this gimmick kind of based on the William Castle horror gimmicks of like the shocks and other things. But this was, they would give you a scratch and sniff card, and you would scratch specific items when it matched up with the movie, and then smell it, and it'd be, something nice like roses, but then something odd like pizza or skunk or fart, and just weird scents as you'd expect from a John Waters movie. And they've actually remanufactured these cards now with releases of when the film shows in theaters, so they're going to have those on hand. And there was even another movie that's out right now, we've been playing this year, called Dead Lover, that did their own version of this called Stinkovision. And it's about this like gravedigger horror romance. And they give out these Stinkovision cards to match the smells of the graveyard and rotting corpses, apparently. So, moving on at the Frida, they're also doing a Humphrey Bogart Fest, Bogie Fest, that's been going on for a couple of months. And this month, the one that jumped out to me was The Treasure of the Sierra Madre, the John Huston directed film from 1948. Of course, very, classic, no stranger to cinephiles. But kind of the reason why I'm excited about this one in particular is that I read the Lillian Ross book called Picture recently, and it details the production of John Huston's Red Badge of Courage, which he made soon after The Treasure of the Sierra Madre. And this was kind of a passion project for him that, was supposedly one of these movies that was kind of totally changed, destroyed in post-production, and came out in very mixed kind of reviews and didn't do what they wanted the movie to do by any means. And then he went on to make The African Queen right after that. But it's just a fascinating look at Huston, this enormous figure in Hollywood and big personality, and just what, making a movie back in the late 40s, early 50s was like. And then this is actually the next film that I'm featuring is the one that I kind of am most excited to talk about this month. And this is Junebug from 2005. And this movie was definitely like a critical darling, and a lot of people saw it, were talking about it when it came out. And I believe Amy Adams was even nominated for an Oscar for her supporting performance in this. And she's fantastic. And this was what really kind of pushed her onto the scene. And it's very much like indie drama, family melodrama with some comedy in it, about a man who returns to his like rural North Carolina home with his recently wed British art gallerist wife, who happens to be checking out this outsider artist in the area that she wants to represent at her gallery. And so they go and stay with the family. And there's a lot of animosity between the brothers of this family. The older one who travels in, played by Alessandro Nivolo. He's awesome in this. And then the other one, really interestingly, is played by Ben McKenzie, who at the time, I believe, was still on the OC, the TV show. And he gives a great performance and is very angry performance in this movie. A lot of resentment between these brothers. But then Amy Adams is like this, breath of fresh air, bubbly, you kind of, that the other characters don't really know what to do with how this person ended up in their lives. And she's 9 months pregnant, married to the younger brother, Ben McKenzie. And, I think I saw this on calendars last year and possibly recommended it, but it really just jumped out at me at this time of, where did this movie go? Where did this filmmaker go? He is directed by Phil Morrison. He went on to direct one other film, All Is Bright, that was just from a few years ago with Paul Giamatti and Paul Rudd playing, I think, kind of hustlers with a parking lot Christmas tree venture. Or, I don't, kind of came and went a little bit, but I really want to seek that out now and watch it. But JUNEBUG, I really want to rewatch and kind of see if it holds up in this estimation that I have of it in my mind. And so lastly, at Camp FRIDA this month is a movie called Killer Condom. And I think I'd seen this box because Vinegar Syndrome put out a Blu-ray reissue or restoration of this in the last few years, but I knew nothing about this movie. It's a German production, but set in New York City. I'm not sure if it was actually shot in New York City or elsewhere, but it's about a carnivorous living condom that is running havoc over Johns in the brothel gay prostitution scene in seedy New York City, and the cop that sets out to find this killer condom. So yeah, sounds pretty incredible, and certainly worth checking out. And then going to the Gardena cinema this month, this was another movie that really hit me, and one that I wanted to talk about is the Monster Squad from 1987, Fred Decker's movie, written actually by Shane Black. I'm not sure where in the kind of sequential order this came in Shane Black's writing with the original Lethal Weapon, but it was right around the same time. And, this movie, I was 9 when I saw this in theaters and still think about it all the time, especially the theatrical experience of, I was actually in LA from Arizona on a family trip, and my dad and I went out and specifically saw this movie in Westwood one night at one of the smaller theaters in Westwood, just off Lynbrook. I forget the name of it, but it was not one of the enormous single screen theaters, but I can still picture this theater and going in and out on this particular night because I just loved this movie so much. My dad was really not happy about going to see this kids monster movie, and he ended up really liking it. And this was, for people of this time, this was a real staple of boys sleepover, on cable kind of movie. So, really excited. I've been recommending this movie to all my friends with kids, and some of them have watched it with them and loved it. And so it's one I'll be recommending for a long time, I think. And then going to the Vista this month, they're only doing repertory screenings at midnights and matinees, weekend midnights and matinees. Otherwise, they're showing newer movies on film. But the two that I wanted to highlight, one midnight film, Jackie Chan's 1985 Police Story. And this is kind of Jackie Chan's biggest early, series of films. They did a bunch of police story movies, and this one was a huge hit. But it didn't, they attempted to release it in the US, and it didn't really find its footing. It wasn't until Rumble in the Bronx broke through in the US that they then actually released Police Story 3 after its Hong Kong release. They released it in the US as Super Cup. So a lot of people know the Police Story like world through the movie Super Cup. And that was certainly how I first saw it. And I, remember going to see both of these Jackie Chan movies, Rumble in the Bronx and Super Cop, in the theater and being like bowled over by those. Rumble in the Bronx came out in 1995. So 10 years after Police Story, and then Super Cop in 96. So when those first came out to the US. So, Police Story still ends up on like top 10 action movies of all time lists. And, it's kind of a must to see on film, I think. And then the other one, kind of in a different direction of action. This is a weekend matinee, The Spy Who Loved Me, the Roger Moore James Bond movie from 1977. And I am definitely going to make this one because one of my favorite screens from last year was the Thunderball weekend matinee on 35 millimeter at the Vista. And it just played so well. I mean, it's a really great, of like I believe 8 Sean Connery Bonds. It's, maybe the best. And so I'm interested to see another Bond movie, especially a Roger Moore one with a crowd, and see how they react to this. I'm in Chinatown this month at Now Instant Image Hall. They're showing this movie that I'd never heard of, a movie by Neil Young. He co-directed this actually with Dean Stockwell in the early 80s, called Human Highway. And this is being co-presented by Mutma's Gallery they had at their gallery a different space, like a Devo exhibit this month. And so they're teaming with Now Instant to do this. And it kind of reminds me a little bit of David Byrne's True Stories, just from what it sounds like, of kind of bizarre, quirky character set around this gas station diner that's next to a nuclear power plant, kind of on the verge or right before an impending, world apocalypse. And then so moving to Brain Dead Studios, this one kind of going with the killer condom theme, but not a very different kind of movie, Dildo Heaven, being presented by Hollywood Entertainment. And I believe Muscle Distribution released this on Blu-ray last year. And so it's getting a theatrical presentation here in LA. And this movie is the filmmaker Doris Wishman, who made just, a slew of movies, especially on video, in the 80s and 90s. This was her 29th and final film. And I really don't know much about him, the kind of like softcore sexploitation. She's a very big name kind of in the queer filmmaker world. And so I think Hollywood Entertainment always does really interesting stuff with their screens. So I expect that one to be a good one. And then another film being presented at Brain Dead, this time by the Pure Cinema podcast. They're showing the notorious 80s horror film, The Jar, which is mostly notorious for being awful. So, I think it's that kind of screening. So good, so bad it's good. Like, or maybe they're presenting it as, kind of trying to reestablish its reputation. I don't know, but that's certainly an interesting one to check out. And then the other one this month is on 35 at Brain Dead. They're showing Orson Welles' late film from 1973, F is for Fake. And, I first found this film through Criterion, and it's like a real charmer, a lot just because Orson Welles comes across just like so charmingly and so fun in this movie. And it kind of touches on themes that, he was very interested in, especially in regards to his own celebrity and his own persona. And it's kind of ostensibly a documentary about this real life art forger, but then weaves in this narrative and is about kind of authenticity in art and life. And I don't think this plays too much on 35 millimeter. So this is a really interesting screen and unique chance to go out and see that. And the Art Theater of Long Beach is getting in this month on a bunch of theaters are doing Mother's Day kind of thematic screenings. And theirs this month is Serial Mom, the John Waters movie from 1994 with Kathleen Turner, and just very fun, crazy movie. I mean, I haven't seen this since the 90s, even with, it has gained in reputation and certainly like a fully established cult film now. But I think that's a really fun one. And then See It on 16 millimeter is doing another secret Grindhouse screening of a 70s horror film on 16 millimeter. I'm really going to try to get out to that one this month. Oh, UCLA. I mean, this is perhaps the UCLA Film and TV Archive. This might be the like movies to see this month. They have their annual Festival of Preservation happening at the Billy Wilder Theater at the Hammer Museum, and it's free, like as all UCLA Film and TV Archive screenings are there. And I mean, that's just like an incredible bounty for cinephiles. They're showing at least 8 films, and I kind of picked out 3 that sounded really interesting to me. 8 Girls in a Boat from 1934, which is about a girls' like crew rowing team. Merrily We Live is a late 30s screwball comedy. And then Black Girl from 1972, kind of they have sort of a more modern, overlooked films in this series as well. And then moving on to the Academy Museum has just some great screens on 35 millimeter this month, starting with Terms of Endearment, the 1983 adaptation of Larry McMurtry's novel of the same name. And I'm a huge McMurtry fan. I've read, a bunch of his books. I haven't read this one, and I haven't seen this film. I've seen clips of it. Because it was an enormous film at the time. Reading back on this movie, it was the second highest grossing movie of 1983. This kind of family melodrama. Sometimes it's described as a weepy or a crier, but the Jack Nicholson and Shirley MacLaine performance and Deborah Winger, were all like Academy. Most of those were Academy nominated, I believe. I think the reason I've held off of it is I've always wanted to read the book first. And I think it's time I finally just gave in and went and saw this movie. And so I'm hoping to make that one. And then also at the Academy, and this is on 35 millimeter Nitrate film, the Jules Dassin movie from 1950, the noir Night in the City. And if you haven't seen this is just a great noir. Jules Dassin, great filmmaker. And then lastly, of the film 35 millimeter screens, there is the Kurosawa film from 75, Dersu Uzala. And this, of course, is the only film that Kurosawa made outside of Japan. It was a Soviet production set in Mongolia. And I just, for whatever reason, haven't pulled the trigger on watching it, but I already bought tickets for this one because I've got to see, finally kind of see this. It's supposed to be fantastic. At 2220 Arts and Archives, this is a really interesting, another foreign pick for this month being presented by Mezzanine, a 1998 film called Phantom Beirut. And I didn't know this Lebanese film, but I've always been very interested in kind of earlier Lebanese, Beirut, Tehran, Iranian cinema pre-Islamic Revolution. But this movie kind of tackles that period head on. It's about a character who's fed up with fighting in the Lebanese civil war in the 80s and fakes that he's dead and leaves, but then he comes back 10 years later hoping people don't remember who he is, but his identity starts to seep out. And it's a bit of, I believe it's a bit of a kind of a mystery crime noir comedy, a bit of an odd tone. So really interested to see what that's like. At Philosophical Research Society, 7th House is continuing this really cool series they have called Out There, which is like intergalactic space foreign animation. One of these, the first one is The Cathedral of New Emotions from 2006. And this is supposed to be one of the most out there, like psychedelic, crazy animated movies ever made, and a more modern one at that. A lot of these psychedelia animated stuff are from like the 70s and 80s. And then another one from the 80s, more in this vein, is The Son of the Stars from 88 is also showing. And then moving on to American Cinematheque, they, two films I highlighted. They had two filmmaker retrospectives kind of ongoing this month. Chantal Ackerman retrospective and Krzysztof Kieślowski. The Ackerman film I highlighted is she made a musical in the 80s called Golden 80s. And I've actually never seen it, but would love to see what a Chantal Ackerman musical is like. And then the Kieślowski movie, they are showing the Full Colors trilogy, of course, that gets shown a lot. But, one of his films that's lesser seen, made before the Three Colors trilogy, was Blind Chance. And this was made in Poland, Polish film, and really interesting movie. And then the other two I wanted to highlight are a documentary and then a cinematic void screening. The documentary is Z Channel, A Magnificent Obsession. And I'm be interested if other kind of cinephiles, had a similar experience with this movie. This was a documentary I first saw it played on the IFC cable channel a ton in the 2000s. I actually recorded it. I still had was still using a VCR frequently then, and recorded it to a VHS tape so I could rewatch it. And I would just put it on because it's one of these movies that's essentially made up of film clips. It showed, sort of the joy and fun of it is all of these incredible film clips, but it's about this guy who started Z Channel, like a local cable channel that he sold door to door in LA in the 80s and 90s. And it was a premium cable channel, it was a movie channel, but he showed kind of movies of his taste. It was like a crazy variety. Like he would show Star Wars movies, he showed De Palma, he'd show a ton of foreign films, Peckinpah. It was just, a wild gamut. And it was where a lot of people discovered, filmmakers kind of discovered these movies. And I discovered a ton of great titles that led me to go seek those out. And I know, my show that I do and the write-ups I do in a lot of ways are for other cinephiles and filmmakers to pick up on certain movies and look them up, even if they can't, make these screenings. And so I think that movie is kind of one of these, that does that for a lot of people. And then the cinematic void screening I wanted to highlight this month is JD's Revenge, the blaxploitation movie from 1976. This is one I've always wanted to see. It's about like a guy who dies in the 40s, but then gets reincarnated in the 70s inside another guy's body, and he sets out to take revenge. It's almost like a Ghost definitely had to be inspired in a certain way by this, the Whoopi Goldberg, Patrick Swayze 80s, huge hit. But yeah, I've already gotten a ticket for that and can't wait to see it. At Vidiot's this month, highlighting two movies. They're showing a neo-noir on 35 millimeter, the James Foley film from 1990, starring Jason Patrick, After Dark, My Sweet. And I believe Jason Patrick's going to be there for this screening. This is another one of these movies, I like neo-noir a lot and just haven't seen this one. And so really hoping to make that on 35. And then they're showing for the 40th anniversary of Prince's Under the Cherry Moon. And if you haven't seen this, it is a very unique film. I'll kind of try to couch it in that. I didn't love this film the first time I saw it. The performances it's an unusual style. And Prince actually directed this movie. It's like a black and white, 20s era black, think Josephine Baker, jazzy, sort of Art Deco world, really incredible production design. But Prince directed a couple of films. He famously didn't direct Purple Rain. And I think it shows to a degree because this is just something altogether unique and almost outsider in terms of filmmaking. And so I'm really interested to revisit it kind of anew and see if it holds up or is just still kind of an oddity. Whammy has some really interesting stuff, of course, this month. They're showing this. I've never seen an Indian Bollywood horror film, but they're showing one that's one of the biggest, Virana. And then they're showing two kind of extreme cinema, sex violent, Lust Mord from 87 and Kyrie Ellison from 1993. And that's being presented by Muscle Distribution, which has been putting out a ton of really interesting films. So I think both of those are real highlights. And then at Video Archive Cinema Club this month, I'm highlighting two 16 millimeter screens. I mean, the 16 millimeter screens there always sell out very fast. So if you see one that you want to go to and the tickets are available, grab them. They do hold a few tickets at the door for standby, and I'm hoping to do that myself at both of these screens. The first, White Lightning from 1973, the Burt Reynolds movie. I mean, this is just such a great, like, Southern, unusual movie. You know, I know it's a favorite of Tarantino's. You know, I bet this is even potentially like Tarantino's personal print of the film. And it's, you know, and I think about with Tarantino, I think about From Dusk Till Dawn a lot, which played at the beginning of the month on 16 millimeter, because it's very much like a two halves movie, a very unusual structure for a film where you have the first half is kind of this fun, lighthearted party movie with Burt Reynolds, you know, and two like great looking woman and him and his friend kind of road tripping around the South. And the second is like a crime noir movie of this cop who becomes obsessed with them and, you know, becomes a chase movie. And so, yeah, I'm really excited. I've never seen that in the theater. So I think that'll be very fun. The other 16 millimeter at the end of the month is Joe Dante's The Burbs, which has become a bit, you know, kind of established cult movie with Tom Hanks. Really, really fun movie. Bruce Dern, incredible in this movie. And then the other one I wanted to highlight is one of their weekday matinees that I love going to. And this is The Seawolf from 1941, an Edward G. Robinson movie where he plays like a Captain Ahab-esque character. He's the captain of this ship that picks up these men from a shipwreck, and it turns out they're fugitives, and he won't let them go off of the boat. And it becomes like a fight between the fugitives and this, you know, strong-willed captain. And I, you know, just love Edward G. Robinson in this period. So I'm definitely going to make that one. Cinephile's back with screens this month after a bit of a break. They've relaunched their micro cinema, and they're getting in on the Mother's Day kind of thematic screen. And this is very much a counter programming one, a horror comedy from the 90s just called Mom. You know, I don't know if this was a straight to video movie or had a little theatrical run, but I really don't know anything about it. But it sounds like it would be a great double feature with Serial Mom. But that's, you know, very fun. Take your mom to that one. The Eastwood, a ton of great screenings this month. See It On 16 is doing their own Mother's Day film programming they're taking around Rosemary's Baby to a few theaters this month. And so that's a great pick. And then one I actually saw last year, Matt's Mortuary, which is doing made for TV horror at the Eastwood every month, is showing Ghost Watch. And this is kind of like a really interesting film, if not altogether like it's, you know, entertaining effort. But it was shown on the BBC as kind of a live movie. It was supposed to be like and it was presented as like a World of Worlds, this is really happening kind of thing, as like a live investigative journalism piece about a haunted house, like that there were ghosts in this, you know, township, normal kind of family home. And these reporters go stake it out for a night to like see if they can capture stuff that happens. And like it slowly starts to become, it's very, very slow burn, and like slowly starts to become a little bit scary and eerie, and is probably most famous that it like led to tons of people calling into the BBC, wanting to know what was going on with this, that they had to turn it off because it was scaring everyone, because a lot of people kind of, believed it. And it was like never shown again. It has become kind of this rarely screened, a little bit, held in esteem for that. But whether it will fully deliver as like a horror movie, probably it doesn't, but it's still a really interesting watch, I think. And then they're continuing their year of Haneke at the Eastwood and showing Amour this month, the 2012 Michelle Haneke movie, great one. At Old Town Music Hall, they're showing, when people ask me, this is something every moviegoer gets asked, is like, what's your favorite movie all the time? And my, stock answer is His Girl Friday, the Cary Grant, Howard Hawks, Rosalind Russell movie from 1940. And I rewatched it enough that like, yeah, it's not really a stock answer for me. This is my favorite movie, and it's showing at the Old Town Music Hall this month. And, any chance to catch this with a crowd is worthwhile. And, for a silent pick with live score on the Wurlitzer organ, I chose The Four Horsemen of the Apocalypse from 1921, a war film based on the book. And then jumping to Lumiere Cinema, which really is kind of more like a new run art house these days, but does have occasional repertory screenings. This one really caught my eye. It's a big co-presentation by Stupid Co-Biz, Cons to Dogs, Zine, and Revival Hub LA. And it's of the 2003 dog movie Quigley. It's about an angel dog and Gary Busey, and I don't know much more than that, but certainly sounds fun. Cinespia is getting started over Memorial Day weekend, and really, kind of just in general, outdoor films are getting started at the end of this month. All the outdoor screens, I really hope to do a big profile in June of, but Cinespia is starting with E.T., which is kind of a can't miss, I think there. And then at the Culver Theater, of all the Mother's Day programming, I would say this is the one that I think would be kind of, especially if you're going to actually take your mom to, and not just sort of a counter program horror one. They're showing Mermaids, the 1990 Cher, Winona Ryder, Christina Ricci, mom-daughter movie that's really fun. And Fan Mail Cinema Club is putting this on with karaoke and photo ops, and that should be a very fun screening. And then also another monthly series, the Hellraisers Film Club is showing Cemetery Man. I've always wanted to see this movie. Very odd, weird horror movie from the 90s starring Rupert Everett, and I hope to finally make it out to see it in the theater. And then at the New Bev this month, they're, of course, transitioning from their big William Bodine month. There's still one or two Bodine screenings there if you want to catch any more. But they're moving into a George Peppard actor tribute. Of course, I really just know him as Hannibal from the 80s A-Team TV series, which I loved and saw almost all of those episodes. But he really had a moment as being a potential leading Hollywood man in his 60s and 70s and got a lot of starring roles. And so they're showing a lot of those films. I've seen none of them. The ones I highlight here are a double feature, House of Cards and From Hell to Victory, and then a war one called The Victors from 1963. And then, not to be outdone by the Vista, the New Beverly has their own weekend Memorial Day matinee of a James Bond movie, Sean Connery's Diamonds Are Forever, showing on the same Memorial Day weekend. So if you want to make it a full James Bond weekend in the theater, that sounds pretty good. So that's it for May. Check out Camp Frida, the new Movietown feature documentary, of course, out on YouTube. And I will see you out at the theater.